All right, all right, all right. So we've got a 24 by 18 stretched piece of canvas, toned with a little bit of brown, blue, maybe a little red thrown in there, and white. And it's just so I have, yeah, look at it, it's kind of similar value to a flesh tone. So it just so happens that it's warm. And today, decided it's just recently up in a place in Sonoma County called Riverfront Park, and it's just got a lot of beautiful redwoods. Not quite as dense as the Armstrong Woods area, but pretty dense. So I kind of like the idea of light kind of filtering through these redwoods, illuminating a couple of them, but just barely, and a lot of dappled light on the ground, a lot of stuff that I can actually kind of palette knife in there a little bit. So we're going to play with some shapes today. Last week was just architecture. This time it's pretty much all organic. And one thing that I in my head, I always go through this in my head. I sometimes don't discuss it. So the lightest, brightest areas are back in here, right? They're behind. The darkest areas are probably in between, and the kind of foreground is not receiving light, but it is light. In other words, it's receiving more skylight. So it's not deep shadow, where if you look at some of the foliage that might be, way, way back in here, it's very, very deep, where this has a little bit more cool light in it, more of a blue. This gets a little deeper. So we've got different passages. Those sit in front. Those I will be doing pretty much at the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of get some placeholders in there. We're not going to do any drawing. We're just going to do painting. So what I'm going to do is kind of just put some placeholders in. We're going to start with this one, which is just slightly off center. So we're going to put it about here. Okay. And then there's one off to the right of it. And then a big thick one. And so the colors I'm using are a combination of ultramarine and the asphalt. And I'm just kind of looking at these spaces, empty spaces. And that's basically when you're looking at all these things, put them in there. Just like I say all the time, put them in with, like, they're right on the money, but also keep in mind, there's a good chance they could be off. And if so, you'll adjust that. That's why you don't want to over refine in the beginning. I relate everything that when I speak in terms of what I'm doing, I always am relating it to what I would do if I were painting literally on location. And I had the chance this last week to paint some trees on location up at, where was I? The Legion of Honor up in San Francisco. So, which is nice. It was fun. Good practice. Different kinds of trees, not these kind of trees, more of a cypress, more of a bendy. Probably opened up that space more, but I don't care. And it gets pretty dense right in this one area. Again, blue and brown, a little bit of terp. But it's not runny terp. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I was watching a class of mine, and very often they used, when I say, well, I use a little bit of terp, it's like a puddle of terp. This is just terp that is just enough to loosen up the paint so I can get it on there. This is going to go a lot darker, by the way, just so you know. This is all foliage up in here. Painting like this is actually fun. Painting figurative like this is actually fun too. It's a little more challenging because of the accuracy of what a figure entails, but it's still kind of fun. So this line right in here is going to be about in here. Okay. So that's going to be the bottom of this tree. Bottom of this tree. And we'll get some that come way down below. Just approximate placeholders, you guys. And then shadows. All right, that's pretty good for right now. Let's get some darks down in here. The dark's a little on the warm side, and I don't mind that. I'm much more concerned about the placeholder and it being somewhat neutral. I don't care if it's a little warm. I'd probably have it, in my opinion, I'd probably rather have it be a little warm than cool. And if you ask me why, I won't answer it because I don't know that I have an answer for that. It's just, it's a feeling. See, I can't pull this down because I've got this board blocking, so I have to be kind of careful. Okay, so I think we're in pretty good shape here. The reason I don't want to overdo this whole background right now, I mean, not background, the trees, because I don't want to have to fight thick, dark paint when I paint some of those light colors behind, which is what I'm going to do almost immediately. So, got a nice kind of abstract piece here that kind of feels like trees. All right. I take a little bit more blue, a little bit more turp, probably a little too much. And I want to kind of darken it over here a little bit more. Yeah, it's a little too much turp. Hopefully that'll. That's interesting. So I'm actually going to take a knife, I think. Not I think, I know. Take a knife and we're going to mix up some of these lighter colors. And I'm not going to go to the brightest yellow. I'm going to go kind of in between. So I'm going to start with the Naples and I'm using a knife. So I'm mixing Naples and green. And I'm going to pull a little bit of ochre and a little yellow into it. Palette today, white, Naples yellow, just a little bit of cad yellow hue, excuse me for a second, I'm just kind of grabbing some more paint. A yellow ochre, cad orange hue, which I'm going to use it a little bit of quinacridine red, which is permanent alizarin, ultramarine blue, sap green, asphaltum, and burnt sienna. So I'm going to see what this looks like. Fine. Am I happy with it? Yeah. I also have a little medium. The medium is, half of it is safflower oil, and the other half is, it's not even 50-50, it's an eyeball 50-50. The other is a solvent-free gel in liquid form. Just to get some of these base colors down. I like that. That's a pretty good green because it's not really loud. And I know I can go a lot louder. By loud, I mean intense. The intensity is something as I've mentioned many, many times, I want to sneak up on that. And I think I can get some. It's going to be really bright down here. Probably the brightest bright is probably right in this area in here. But under it, I want to have a little bit of a green. Little piece of light coming through here. Little pieces of green infiltrating back in here, there. Little pieces. And then kind of a light. Well, that's going to be kind of fun to put in right at the end. So these are in their own way. These are kind of placeholders. Now, no one has asked, but I'm just using a knife because it just feels like I want to use a knife. That's all. It's no great trick. I could be using a brush. For some reason, I'm using a knife. Okay, so we've started kind of some of the patterning of this thing. Now, when I put this final wash on over here, I put it on so thin that, as you can see, the turp dissolved it. And so it needs to be a darker, stronger. So we just pop that in there. Okay. And there's some trees back in here. We're going to start in, and I'm going to really clean these trees up as we move along when it's ready. That's a good line, by the way, when it's ready. when it's time. If I do it too soon, I may have to fight it and go over it and wipe some of it out. I don't want to do that. Well, I kind of like that edge. Okay, now we want to keep moving along. We're only about 10 minutes in. So I'm going to spot, do what we call, a lot of people refer to as color spotting, kind of red, darker. These light spots, bright light spots are 1, 2, 3, 4 little spots here. Those I'm going to pop in at the very end, right at the very end. It's not going to happen yet. So one thing I want to keep in mind as I'm mixing my colors is, what color is my canvas? What tone, what value is my canvas? How does this tone relate to anything up here? So this tone in here is probably similar to this kind of cool tone right down at the bottom. And I love this little pathway that kind of works its way up. So I think first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that color right there, and with the blue and the brown and the white. And I want to match this value. See, I'm too dark. That's pretty close. That's real close. That's right. That's almost exactly where I want it. And just kind of drag this paint into it. So I'm not really applying heavily loads of paint, just kind of a nice dry brush. Okay, that's good. Now, as this is still shadow, but it's a skylight hitting it. The shadows here have the canopy of the tree, so it's not receiving as much skylight. That's why it's feeling darker and a little warmer. So I'm going to take the color that I have. I'm going to add a little bit of brown and a little bit of blue to it. So what I've done is darken it. And we're going to come right from here, a little too blue. I'm going to throw a little burnt sienna into it, and a little medium. I might be a little too dark as well. So I hit a little white in there also. There, that looks pretty good. And again, I could easily be off in my value a little bit. And if I am, I will adjust it, as I am doing right now. I didn't feel it was dark enough. Okay. There, more shadows. Probably a little darker too. And I'd rather overpaint these shadows and have them a little bit, so I have to overlap the lights over them. I've got it a little darker. I threw a little bit more asphaltum in and a little bit more ultramarine just at this point, just to get a little dark right about here, because I see it. In other words, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm painting pretty much what I see. And this shadow gets a little lighter than the tree. So we're just going to scumble some of this color back into it. It's a little lighter there. That's pretty good. Probably a little darker here. And that's why you're always going to readjust. Just because you put it down, it's not right. That's my favorite line. You know, put it down like you know what you're doing, assume you're wrong. I'm always wrong. Sometimes wrong can be cool, though, you guys. Sometimes wrong can work for you. And it's, it sounds kind of defeatist, but literally, you can, if you're wrong sometimes in color, but you're right in value, sometimes you're adding a little bit of something that you're bringing to the painting that is really not there. So that's kind of our base shadows. There's a little bit up in here. It's pretty dark. So I could take the blue and the asphaltum again. I use those colors a lot because they give me my neutrals. The reason being, asphaltum is very red, blue is very cool. They're both two of the darkest colors on the palette. So by using them, you can really create a wonderful array of darks and grays. And when in doubt, stay neutral, stay more towards the grays, and try and always think in terms of, now is that a warm gray or a cool gray? And that'll help you. That really will help quite a bit. And if it's a warm gray, lean it warm. I see a little bit of warmth happening right here. So I'm using different kinds of strokes. These were down, I'm using horizontal, now I'm using angular. Just, I don't want the boring quality of the sameness. So I want to create illusions of differences, which creates more interest in paintings. So there's a little dark mass right there. We're going to kind of go plop, blue, brown, a little bit more on the blue side, maybe up in here. This is a wonderful brush to use for this kind of stuff. You don't want to use a really nice brush that gives you beautiful edges as far as crispness. You want kind of a freedom at this point. And we will bring, as I've said many, many times, we will bring refinement as we approach completion. Probably one of the hardest things for me to learn when I was learning to paint. Because your natural tendency is to want to make it look good right from the beginning. Now, what I began to learn is I want my strokes to look good, So if they stay, if these strokes stay, that's great because they look good. Yet at the same time, I'm not so in love with them that I won't wipe them out if I don't think they're working. Don't fall in love with your painting too soon. Ooh, write that one down. It's one I want to, because if you do, you'll be afraid to destroy it. So we're starting to get the movement of value, more so than the movement of color. All right, yet I really haven't gone as dark as I can go, which is great because I feel I want that freedom to be able to push darker if and when I need it. Okay, I'm just playing with colors and values. It's kind of fun because it's not, I know I don't have to be anatomically correct, or I don't have the burden of accurate perspective to have to deal with right now. Instead, I have a feeling of paint quality. And so I can really invest more of my thought process into the paint quality and not so much the accuracy of perspective or anything. So let's keep going. That's an old brush I have there. Okay, I'm going to take a nice flat like this. It's a number 8 flat. We're going to kind of pop those trees in. They're a little lighter. So I'm using a little, into the same mixture I was using, a little ochre and a little burnt sienna. And let's start with one tree right there. And he's going to need some more darks into it. That's okay. Going to go a little darker with the color. And we're going to get another tree right in front of it, right there. And another one right next to it. A little darker. And then the one on the edge. And I've opened up a little bit more space, which is okay because I kind of want it there. I can take that first color I was using, the ochre and the burnt sienna along, and really I've mixed it in kind of some of those other colors, and I kind of want to come right back in here with a little bit more red. So what red means is burnt sienna. Okay, where else do I see the reds heat up? I'm going to grab my cat orange hue, which is a brighter red, and maybe a little bit of Naples to lighten it up just a little bit. But it's pretty bright, right about in here. That's almost that bright. I think I'm going to go a little bit lighter, a little bit of medium in it, and we'll kind of put that nice bright Now, later on, I may look at that and go, geez, I can go lighter because I can see that right now. I think I'm going to be able to. But let's leave that. So in the back of my head, I know, geez, I might come back there later on. It gets a little dirtier. So it mixed a little bit of the other browns into it, right about in here. So it isn't a flat. I can start with a flat color and then mix those colors in. Or I can do what I'm doing and mix them as we go. A little bit same right about in here. A little warmer about here. And then it's going to go up. And I see another beautiful warm area right there. And with that kind of really nice hot color right here. And so I'm moving the warms around right now, okay? The hotter warms. In here, we get some of these areas that feel pretty warm, okay? Let's go back in here. There's a shadow coming from that tree. So visually, I'm moving all over the place. I'm not dwelling in one area and trying to make it just beautifully perfect at this moment. Because I want to, this is the lay-in part of your painting. And during that lay-in part of your painting, you want to lay it in, get everything in there. So I can see that it's a little dark on that edge of the tree. So I just took asphaltum in the same color I was using. And same kind of asphaltum in the tree in front because it gets a little darker. As it starts up lighter and goes darker, darker, darker. Down about in here, it gets pretty dark. Same with this tree. If you're in doubt, paint them together. Something that a teacher of mine used to say.
What do you mean?
Don't try and separate everything. Don't try and, you can count 3 or 4 trees. Don't try and automatically paint 3 or 4 trees. Paint them as a unit. Like this is a unit here. Even though there's a lot of trees in there, I may get a little separation there later, and then I may not. I don't know. Depends on how much time I have and how I feel about it as I'm working. So you're constantly adjusting, constantly. You're not staying in one place. More red. There we go. I like that better. Okay. So the look of it shaping up. Now I've got to start pushing some darks. Before I do, I'm going to start getting some of the greens in. All right. So I'm kind of going in a mishmash order. It's a technical term. Today. And part of that is I want to. The other part of it is I want you to realize that you can go about painting almost any way as long as you're aware of where you're at in your painting. So here's a cooler green color. What did I do? I mixed sap green, ultramarine blue, and a little bit of Naples yellow. And it's real dry paint. I can feel it. So I added a little bit of the medium. And I want to go a little darker. So I'm taking the 2 colors without the sap and darkening it just a little bit. Okay, that's. If it pushes into the brown, all great, because I kind of want it to go a little darker here and there. I'd rather end up being too dark here than I would too light. Push them together if you have to. Okay, so we've painted that in shadow. Pretty much similar type of green, maybe a little bit more light into it. So I might bring a little white into that color, and I think I just added a little too much. So I'm going to take more brown and more blue, excuse me, green and blue and sap, and we're going to test it. Where is it? Right about here. Looks pretty good. If you can make it look effortless, do so. If you're working hard at it and you're really having to make tons of strokes and correct, and it's going to show. It's going to make your piece look labored. And some of you that maybe paint a lot know exactly what I mean. I certainly do. Over the years, I've gotten more daring. A little lighter, a little more ochre maybe. Right. It goes lighter down in here, extends about to here. I can extend it a little further if I want to get a little bit more exaggeration of that, of the pathway, which I do. In other words, I want that pathway to angle more because I can bring this over further too. I'll just kind of get some tones in here so it's kind of covered. Okay, so we're starting with kind of the approximate tones you want. I'm going to start with a darker green and work my way up. And so I'm going to take the same color I was just using, add the blue and I'm going to test this. That looks pretty good. I know the trees are going to be darker though. So we're going to kind of do a little bit in here. This is kind of difficult stuff to do when you get this filtered light. Every time I put my brush down, I'm picking up that pigment. And so I'm lightening it with that. So I'm constantly going back and remixing the color. I just stood back for 1 second. It's the first time I stood back at just about 25 minutes in. So don't want to get too much in because I want to get the dark of the trees in, but I do want to kind of get the overall up in this vacant area. So we'll get the greens going up in here, kind of filter across. Oops. A little darker because I picked up a lot of light. A little blue, a little green mixed into that color. I'll chip that away when I come back. Okay, I'm going to start with a little bit of a lighter color now, just a little bit. So I'm going to take some Naples to that same color I had, add a little bit more green and blue. I want to keep, the blue keeps the skylight, just so you guys are wondering. The blue keeps the feeling of skylight, and because if I go too lime green, that's pretty good. A little bit more Naples. Let's try it one more time. That's pretty good. This color matching, it might take people that are inexperienced a little bit longer. Be close. Even if you're not right on the money, be close, you know? Okay, we'll leave it alone for a little bit. It's going to come across here. It's going to come right about in here, just so I know. Bring a little bit more Naples into that color and a little bit of yellow into it. And we'll pop it right. Yet I'm probably going to destroy part of that. All right, I wanted to get enough of that in because I want to be able to have time now to go. I want this whole thing set up in the next 20 minutes. So I'm going to go back to the dark. I'm going to get rid of some of the green in my brush on my rag just by pulling it. And I'm going to remix the dark. So brown, separate area on my palette. Blue. If I want to really get some interest into it, I'm going to throw a little bit of the quinacridine or the alizarin into it. And so we're going to start going with the darks now, right? A little bluer than I want. So I just throw some more brown into it. A little bit of peeking through some of the foliage. We'll kind of put it in there, but we'll put the foliage back in later. So you put it in, wipe it out, put it in, wipe it out. Just like painting tree holes. Same exact concept.
Sky holes?
Huh?
Did you say like sky holes or tree holes?
Sky holes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Okay. Now you can see how much darker I think as I stand back. Yeah, it's not getting too much. I was wondering how much glare I'm getting, but I'm not getting too much. We're going to take this part of the tree. I'm going to bring it up because I brought the foliage down too far. This is the fun stuff, you guys. Truthfully, kind of creating these fun edges. Probably the wrong terminology calling them fun edges, but a little bit of dark sneaking down from up in there. So I'm standing back. I'm looking for the patterning. There is a patterning shape without the exactness. And I know I've brought up that exactness term in the past, and I actually mean it. I don't want everybody to feel like you've got to be exact. You want to be close. And, you know, depending on your own design and drawing abilities, you may want to change it quite a bit. And let's go in. There's a little tree. Wow, I just caught that. I didn't see that earlier. Man, that's really neat. There's this little tree over here. Let's paint it right through the foliage. We'll paint the foliage again. Okay. You're going to add, subtract. Not that I had to put that tree in. If I had left that tree out and it still ended up looking good, no one would know except you guys. And I'm pretty darn sure you're not going to tell on me. So. They go pretty dark. That's why I was glad I saved those darks. Now with that, I'm adding some medium so it'll go on easily. And now I can cut in on this plant a little bit up in here and push those darks back where I see them. You almost have got to think of yourself as almost an abstract painter at this point. And if you do, you will come up with a much freer, more interesting looking painting. So I'm standing back. That whole area is starting to work. It's really weird. I mean, I shouldn't say it's weird because I expected it to work. But at the same time, when it starts to come to life and it does what you were hoping it would do, you know, that's when you kind of want to celebrate a little bit. Now, this dark is not quite as dark, so I'm going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to that color. And we're going to bring it over, not to this tree, I'm going to bring it over here, here. Bring those darks down. Now it looks like there might be a stump at the bottom of that one tree, and that's why it's getting a little thicker right about in here. And it kind of, the darks blend into that ground plane shadow really nicely. So I can kind of take that color, just move it in. Move it in. Really free, be free with it. Let your paint strokes kind of glide on there. I'm stepping back. Okay, it's doing what I want it to do so far. So that means I could celebrate if I wanted, but I'm not going to celebrate. Don't want to celebrate too soon. You celebrate too soon, and all of a sudden it turns into something you didn't want it to, and then you regret celebrating. So we're going to we got that tree. We want that tree right there. Where it comes down, and then it gets some really nice light reflected back in there. But this tree is pretty dark. Down at the bottom, it gets a little light. We'll add that in, and it broadens just a little bit. So okay. Step back. Fine. Now, this tree is a little wider, and I started making it wider earlier on. So we're going to go a little wider right here. But you can see how those placeholders were really instrumental in telling me about what was right and what was wrong with what I had already done. Some of the trees had to be thickened. Some of them had to be moved a little bit. All right. Shape-wise, everything's, I can really get some nice colors back in here. So I will destroy part of these trees, just see, not necessarily on purpose, just because it's just going to happen. And then I'll put the tree back in if I need to. Step back. So hopefully you guys can see this thing starting to shape up already. I'm going to reach over and I'm going to lay a little, I've been using a lot of asphalt, so I'm going to squeeze that a little bit more. There we go. There's a lot of dark in this painting, and I'm hoping that, I know dark sometimes don't photograph well. You get glare. So I'm hoping that the glare is minimal. And that's, the vertical stroke should help. Horizontal strokes will catch the light. Vertical strokes generally will, the light will not be as reflective on it. Just by pressing hard, I can get a crisp edge. If I want a light edge, I just lift up more. All right, so we're gonna get that tree in, gotta get this group of trees in. I kind of like that sloppiness right in there. I don't want to mess that up. I hate to do that, but there we go. I think we got it. We're just about, I kind of moved from left to right, as you can see. We're gonna get nice. I can see what happens. You put a stroke that way and I can see reflections. So if I keep my strokes more vertical, I can hide, hopefully, some of the reflections and make it a little easier to look at, even though I like to have some nice horizontal strokes into it. Shadow, we want this shadow to start darker and lighten as it goes down. So we're gonna do the same on this side that I did on the other side as far as the darks in the foliage in the foreground, right? So we're just gonna kind of feel our way through it, right there, right here. A little bit darker right here. The base, some areas that cross over, gets a little darker. And then right in here, kind of definitely right about here. And that's a matter of making nice strokes, everybody. You know, all forms of painting, is a matter of making interesting marks. When you're going to paint loose, which is how I kind of like to paint a little bit, your marks, the character of your marks, to me, become a lot more important than if you're painting very realistic. If you're painting very realistic, you're just basically trying to disguise most of your marks. All right. So therefore, I've always felt, and it was told to me by a wonderful, super loose, semi-abstract landscape artist years and years ago, who's no longer with us, and his name was Ted Goshner. He said, painting realistic is easy. Keeping it looking realistic, keeping it kind of free and abstract, that's hard. And I hadn't thought of it in that terms, but the more I thought about what he said, the more sense it made. Darken. A little darker still. I want this darker. There we go. So I'm using a much more controlled brush now. Overall, it's starting to work. I would like to have it pretty much laid in the next 10 minutes. So we're going to do my best to accomplish that. The first thing I'm going to do is take one of these brushes and we're going to kind of scumble some stuff up in this area. And it's not a clean, specific color that I can tell you, oh, we just mix this and this. You just kind of feel your way. I'm using more ochre. Ochre is, for me, in landscapes, particularly in landscapes, is my go-to color. Everybody has one that they kind of fall back on. Mine, over the years, has become more ochre. When in doubt, use ochre. Ochre works well with warms. It works well with cools. So I'm going to use a term. I'm trying to kind of stuff some of these, because it's not, you cannot put your finger and paint that exactly. You have to paint for the feeling of it. And that's the fun part of trying to do something like this, I believe. Fun and maybe frustrating for some people. And boy, do I understand that. So I'm trying to paint some foliage on top of trees, some foliage. This I've opened, where am I? Right here. Right here. And there's some branches. Oh, that was kind of a fun little happenstance. Sometimes a drier color will go on really neat in these areas, just because it doesn't stick everywhere. So we're trying to kind of disturb, and there are some ground right down in here. This ground extends over and is picking up little pieces of light, and I can use almost a Naples and an ochre together. And I'm going to try that and see what happens. First of all, I would probably want to hit one right here on the corner, and then I want to come straight across. And I see one right about there. And right about there. A little bit of foliage has almost a little greenery in there. And then that extends over further right below this tree. A little piece of light. There's a tree right. Okay. So if I have to, I will bring a tree down through it to make it make sense. We're going to extend our way on down right about in here. And this is where, again, make nice marks. Nice marks. So the marks themselves have character. That's why you see me just using little pieces of the paintbrush. And sometimes letting the colors mix one into another. I'm standing back, double checking things. I'm going to start to make things make a little bit more sense. Hopefully. I'm going to start with these trees back here. So I'm going to take ochre, I'm going to take my cad orange hue, even though it's probably better to pick more of a burnt sienna. And I'm going to, right on this, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Right on the edge of that tree, though, I did want to hit it right about here. It's probably a little, I'm going to throw a little bit of alizarin into it. And this tree right next to it. That's probably a little too much alizarin. So all I need to do is add more ochre. Or just push the color of paint back into the paint that's already there, and it'll diminish the intensity. Lighten that up. I wanted to change the plane from the plane here, okay? So when I stand back, this is a lot more intense than that is, but I like it. So that's a change that happened that I actually like. And I see a little piece of warm right about here. Okay. And a little piece, but not quite that warm. So I just add more ochre to it right along the edge of this tree, and not on the tree, in the background, actually. So we're being more particular at this moment. And I've heard that phrase used with in portraiture, because in portraiture, you are particular, little tongue tie there, you are particularizing the individual that you're painting. And with that, but you can do that with landscapes. You can say, I'm being more accurate. I'm being, so maybe particular is not as good of a term as I'm being more accurate. I'm trying to add in a little bit of more accuracy to make it even more believable. All right. So I see a little bit of warmth. Also, whoop, that didn't stick. That just means the paint wasn't wet enough, or I didn't have enough paint on my brush. Okay. So I'm standing back. I do like the color scheme I'm getting. I think the color scheme is beginning to work. All right. That, I won't say makes me thrilled, but I feel pretty good about it. So we want to keep moving. We want to start adding light, a little bit of light to the ground. Now, one of the things that I want to do that I mentioned earlier, I want to take this kind of bluish color, but add a little bit more blue to it. And I've just used up my very first paper towel. I actually got pretty far with just one paper towel. Kind of surprised me. So I'm going to take the warm first with a little Naples. So it's a nice, but there is almost a halo sometime of warmth around these real light colors. And so what I'm doing is I'm laying in the feeling of that halo first, and then I'll come in with the bright colors on top. Just kind of slowly but surely map them in there. And what you're doing slowly is you're creating that tree shape. A little warmer, right about here. The angle, a little bit more severe. There. Can bring it down further. Down to about here. Let it dissipate. So I see a little on the other side of that. So right here, and a little bit right there. Maybe a little bit, not quite as bright, but right about there, it fades. And then right down. Okay. Tends to be working. Now, there are two trees here. There's a tree and there's a tree here. And if I look carefully, there's no way you could be able to see this. But I can see one tree in front of the other. So I've added some alizarin. And we're going to push one tree out in front of the other. What I did is I made this tree in front of this tree. And watch, we're just going to go back and soften it. Okay. The reason I wanted to do that is I'm beginning to see right about here little pieces of foliage starting to come through. And right about so that's starting to work. This is wrong up in here. We need to get some more darks. So I already have a bunch of kind of neutral darks on my palette. Okay. Okay, in here, I think this is pretty good. I'm going to start with some white and some maples and a lot of medium. Solvent-free gel. And we're going to start right here. See how this works. A little bit more white. 2. Now, not as bright, so I'm mixing it back in with some of my ochre colors. As I see it get a little less bright, a little bit more orange, right about here. I'm standing back. I wanted to see how that felt. Feels okay. Well, I need to, something I didn't do earlier. I'll grab another flat or any old filbert here. This filbert will even do. I'm going to right down in here. I want to get a little bit of that warmth before I put this in. So I'm adding the warm and the maples and the medium. And we're going to put a little slash right here. That, whoop, too strong. Get rid of it. Okay. A little bit right here. And then right down on the ground there. Okay, now that tree is casting a clearer shadow. Now we're about 55 minutes into it. So I want to clarify something. I want to take that shadow, match the color pretty much the way it is. Not too dark. And we want to bring it down. Okay, so we can clarify that at any particular time. So even though I threw those areas in really kind of loose, at any particular time, I can come in and clarify any part of that shadow I want to clarify. Up in here, I want it to go a little darker. Boom. So we start to make it, hopefully, make more sense. And you can go, I can do this back and forth as much as I want to until I have it right, or until I feel that it's right and still loose and free enough. Because those are the two factors I want to get. I want the freedom and I want the accuracy. And I want to balance between those two. Okay, so we're going to take the lighter color that I was using with some medium, because I could feel it was pretty stiff, and we want to go right up here. Right there, a little bit here. Definitely there. Okay. Don't like that's too dark. So I'm going to take the other brush with a little bit more warm in it and lighter. And what we're going to do is we're going to lighten this up right in here, but still keep it as part of the shadow. So what I do, put it in there and then brush it into the shadow. And it helps liven things or lighten things up a little bit. And you're doing little adjustments constantly. So I feel like when I put the shadow in, I didn't put it in dense enough. So it's not thick enough, in other words. It comes down from here. It breaks over here. So I'm clarifying some of these shadows. Or I'm very loose when I first put it in. Now I'm becoming more accurate. And it's working pretty good. I got this up too high. I want it down about here, which means I want that shadow up there. So if I need to, you just blend it into the shadow color. And those colors don't have to be exact. In fact, it's probably just as well if they're not exact. Okay, it's starting to work. But I don't want to dwell specifically on that. We have a lot of other territories to cover, like over in here. Probably some of the lightest light in the whole painting. So I'm going to hold on that for a little bit. I'm going to build some more lights up in here. Go back to my knife. Right? I still got that color mixed up that I use, that green. So I'm adding a lot of yellow and a little bit of white to that same color. And I'm mushing it around with my knife. And we're going to come in. And the reason I'm using the knife is I want it to skip. I don't want to hit every spot that neat. So I kind of want it to kind of go in, lay down, and then skip and be a little bit looser and more random. Okay, that's starting to work. I just stood back once again. I think I'm probably a little too yellow, so I'm adding more white to that, and I'm adding a little bit of medium. That will extend the paint and make me not have to push as hard to put it down. And sometimes I want to lay the whole knife low down, and sometimes I just want to barely let a little part of the knife go down. So we're going to go right, where do I want to hit? Right in here. Probably a little further than I wanted to go, but who cares, huh? A little bit in here. So messed up the tree. And that's why you always have a brush clear to fix that tree. So I'm going to keep going in here. And a little bit up in here. Oh, I kind of like it's. This is kind of thick, gooey paint, you guys, that I'm just, oh, look at that. So as I'm picking this paint up, you can see how much I have on my knife. This is the kind of stuff that you could really get lost in and spend time, go back, fix it, change it, constantly just work with it, embellish it. I'm adding a little ochre to that color now, just in one part of it, just to warm it up a little bit, just as we move down in here. Yeah, it's a little ochre, just a little change of color, never hurt anybody. Back to almost the base green I was using. I stand back. It's starting to come alive, okay, which is kind of what I want it to do at this point. I want to have a little fun with it. I see a few subtle darks I can start to pull right up in here. So switch back to the brush. People say, are you a palette knife painter? I'm absolutely not a palette knife painter. I love to use the knife when I think it works. Yet I do know people that are they're purists about using the knife, and they make it work. And I think it's the commitment. I really believe you can, if you're committed to going either way with it, you can make it work. Just let that knife kind of scrape color onto it. Somebody once said, when they were asked why they use a knife, I don't know who it was, but I like the comment, and you can get random marks that you cannot get with a brush. And the random marks counter some of the brush marks that you're making and give a little bit more flavor and character to the overall painting. So we've got just about 30 minutes. So I'm going to move more on the ground. We're going to go there, there. Back to, and this ground light color is just basically a combination of Naples, ochre, and white. And a little medium, because the medium will allow it to flow on there a little bit better. So that gives us the angle of the ground coming through there, okay? And then we've got another area, Naples, yellow and white, picked it up again with some medium, right about in here. It's pretty light on this side of the tree. Now, it might be best to lay it in with a knife, but my knife is already laid out with the green, so I'm not gonna, although I do have 2 or 3 other knives I could use. So we're leading up to some of the lighter areas, but there's a little bit of a foliage, darker foliage interruption right about here. And it's over. So I want to have enough time to come over these trees, because to make the foliage work, it has to be behind the trees in some instances, and then in front of the tree. Okay, let's go over to the right. I'm going to go over to the lightest parts of the painting now, which is going to be white mixed in to the same color, two colors I already have, the Naples yellow and the white. All right, the Naples yellow and the ochre, but it's whiter. There. And almost same right. Going to pick up some of that yellow, beautiful, bright yellow color back in front of that tree. And then back behind the tree that's darker. By God, I just caught that. Let's put that in there. It gets a little darker right here. And then some of that foliage sneaks down on top of it. So we're doing a lot of layering here. Okay, so a little bit more lively right in here because it's a little flat. Some branches and things coming across it, which will put some of that in with a knife and some of it in with a brush. Brighter. Brighter. Definitely brighter. All right. Over in here, we started already. Gotta go back. More white and more Naples and more medium and a little bit more white. And we will go in here. Comes over the trees, comes over the trees. So we're really getting this light to start screaming. A little ground plane right here. And a little ground plane right here. Little piece of light hitting on the ground right in here. And a little variation of oranges and warms. So I'll go back and pick up some of those warms that I already had mixed up. And we're going to illuminate the side of that tree now, which I did earlier, but I didn't do it enough. So we're going to take orange, and I took some Naples, I think, into it, and maybe a little ochre. This part of this tree right here. And the tree to the right has got a lot of warmth. Right? Nah, don't like it. And then the edge of the far tree. and really warm at the very base, right before foliage goes in over it. Okay. That tree we've got in there pretty good. Got these in here. Snap those. Got that red in there. Okay. I'm going to start bringing foliage a little over the trees once we get a few little more light spots back in here. Okay. We're going to do twigs and things before I'm going to do a little bit of work up here, and then we're going to go back up in front of the trees. All right. So down at the very base, I'm going to do some variations. Green. I'm testing. Too light. Green, blue, and ochre. Try it again. Okay. That's pretty good. A little medium mixed into that, should work. Now, what I'm doing here, I could do many, many layers of, just so you know. In a plein air piece, or one way I think of these paintings that I do like this is I think of them as large lay-ins that could be gone back on top of, even though I usually only go back on top of something for about 15 to 20 minutes at the very longest. Because I try and keep the integrity of what I consider a more direct, plein air type of a piece. So,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Bill Cook has a question. When adding medium, does it decrease drying time or speed it up? And how long before it's dry to the touch with a palette knife?
It depends on what medium you're adding. So this is a mixture of safflower oil, and if I added just the solvent-free gel, it would be dry overnight. It really depends upon what kind of medium and how fast you want it to dry. I like mine to dry fast. Some people don't. A lot of people use extenders. An extender is something like, what am I thinking of? Cobalt, not cobalt. Come on, clove oil. Clove oil. I've known artists that have used clove oil simply as an extender because they didn't want it to dry too, or they wanted it to stay wet. I mean, I've known artists that want their paintings to stay wet for an entire month, and they'll just mix clove oil. So you have to kind of develop the feeling of how dry, how fast you want your painting to dry. I use this combination, and it seems to set up fine for me because generally I'm working on more than one painting. Now, on a plein air piece, it's going to stay wet. When you're working outside on location, it's just going to stay wet for pretty much the whole time you're working on it. I know I was doing it yesterday, and it's a different kind of a challenge. It's more of what I'm doing here. Okay, so let's get in and start some of the stuff up at the top. I'm going to take my knife, first of all, and I'm going to start to add some twigs if I can, if this works. And first, I see a light twig coming in right here. Sometimes you have to add a little terp to that paint to get it to kind of go in and stick where you want it to, like that. And any other, yeah, there's some in here right about, let's just put some on. This is kind of scuffing. Once again, my term, I just call it scuffing because I feel like that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of scuffing the surface with the brush and creating feelings of foliage. Now, you can also do it with a liner. Too much of a liner really gets in the way, but I'm going to mix up and we're going to put some of these twigs in. Blue and brown and white. And it's really a matter of how well you use the liner. You got to just use the tip of it, you guys. Like that's a little too thick and heavy-handed. Sometimes I'll get going on a plein air piece and I'll be way too heavy-handed. But boy, if you get them in there just right, it just adds so much, because we're bringing elements in front of the trees. We painted behind them, we painted the trees. Now we're bringing some of these elements back in front. At the same time, if I go back to this brown, I call it brown, but it's brown and blue. I can add some of these in. Now I could do that with a knife, and I could do it with, and I'll use both. I'm painting on very, very thick wet paint now in here. Let's see if I get some of these to come in. This is going to be a little more difficult right in here. Let's start right about here. You got, see, I'm adding a lot of terp to this paint to keep it wet enough. Sometimes knife works better. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the knife just scratches into the paint. So you have to develop your own feel for what is going to work for you. Just putting some strokes in to hopefully make it work. Bring some of the branches in front of some of the foliage so that all the branches aren't. And it actually helps. Now I can do the same thing right in here where all this activity is. And this activity will extend out here. So we put it in outside, and it's darker against a light background. And as it goes over the tree, which is a dark, it lightens up. And we have some of the influence of light hitting it. I'm going to actually take that brush and I'm going to bring I feel sometimes more confident by using a giant brush and just using little parts of it. It's just something I have developed over years. It's like everybody's going to feel a little bit more comfortable with one thing or another. So I'm going to bring some of this foliage, the greens, in over these trees. If it mixes into the brown a little bit, fine, because it's going to be darker in some spots and lighter in some spots. So as it mixes into that brown, I'm going to end up with areas that are a little bit darker. So you can see how it begins to, I'm going to use a knife again and see if I can get some of these dark branches stand out a little bit more. I'll get a little bit of a feeling of the light kind of working its way. Some of this I like to actually put in with a knife because you get different kinds of marks once again. I see a little bit of foliage right in here. Whoops, that's way too light. Just add a little bit more blue to it. Let's try it one more time. I'm just trying to pick here and there where I see things happen. The longer you have to work on this, the more you're going to see. The more you're going to see, the more you can kind of go back. I love to do this over a period of time where I work on it a day, set it aside, go back, work on it again another day. And then each day I'm going to probably notice something a little bit different and hopefully be able to add to it. Sometimes you have to subtract. There's a lot of foliage right here, a lot of foliage. And I could do that with a brush, I could do it with a knife, but I've got a knife in my hand. So I'm going to take the foliage from here, the greens I already have mixed up, lay it in here, bring it a little bit darker, but same kind of green, up. So as you, hopefully what you guys are beginning to see is I'm getting more and more lunch. Now I've got about 10 more minutes left on this. So we're gonna see what else I need to do. One of the things I need to do is add a little bit more, a few more kind of semi-darks. So I actually took green and mixed a little bit of alizarin in it, actually, to dull the green. And I'm gonna use a lot of medium. And we're just gonna loosen up some of this stuff. Not as dark as the tree. So, and which means if I want to go a little lighter and clean up some of this foliage, I can kind of go in there with some of my lighter greens. Same across here. I'm just kind of going back and looking over areas. So we're going to bring this over the tree here, definitely here, a lot. And it's starting to feel pretty good, even though it's not quite where I would definitely want it. I want to bring a little bit more life to this green. I tried not to do much of anything. I was trying mainly to get back in. So it's pretty much where you saw it. And I'm just embellishing more and more as I possibly can on top, bringing things on top, in front of the trees, behind the trees. If I do need refinement anywhere, the only way I can tell that for sure is to stand back. So if I stand back, I think I could probably do a little bit of value changing around that point. So we're going to do a little bit of it so I get a little bit better transition from that one tone to another tone. So blue, brown, white. That looks pretty good. And these kind of adjustments, as I've mentioned, I could do for a long time. Oops, sorry about the camera. I think as I got it going again, I probably brought it a little too close to me. But we're approaching completion. I see a lot that I would like to do, but I've kept the freshness of the plein air kind of concept. The alla prima all at once. And I can always find things that I could definitely improve. but sometimes it takes a while. You have to get back to it. Like in here, there's a lot more going on. Let's get a lot more of those twigs in here. And some of those twigs have a little bit of light on them. So I think maybe that's where we'll spend the last part of our time. With the blue, the brown, the medium, and the terp, and a little liner. And if it doesn't stick, you add more medium. It's a little bit redder than I wanted, but you know, I usually don't mind that because very often these things will take on different kind of colorations and characteristics. There's just a beautiful freedom if you can get enough of those in there, but you really got to keep a light touch. This can get extremely heavy-handed. And the same could be said for putting in any sort of twigs that was paint is way too dry and it wouldn't stick. But if I want it to go in, I've got to keep it super wet. I usually get 1 or 2 strokes and that's about it. And then you've got to reload because you're picking up wet paint all the time. And you've got these little, they're coming down everywhere. Here, coming down from the top, over from the side, back from here. You just want to give a feeling for it. You're not going to get them all in. You just want to make it look dense enough so that it feels natural. That's really what you're doing in your overall painting. You're trying to make it feel as natural as you can, and as at least I do, as unlabored. I don't like, personally, I am not a fan of paintings that look tremendously labored. That may come from the fact that I was an illustrator and had to do paintings that were extremely labored as an illustrator, meaning really refined, which is great. I learned how to do it. But it wasn't, you know, then I would go to galleries or I would go to museums, usually even more so than galleries, and see these incredible paintings, or like I said, it felt like the paint just fell off the brush. And it's so inspiring. It was just so fresh and intriguing to want to do that. And to see if you could do it. And it looked, my opinion is it looked easy and natural. And it was the farthest thing from easy and natural that you could imagine. Difficult. Taking discipline, understanding mediums, understanding brush usage, understanding process, probably more than anything. I think process, honestly, it's interesting because when I teach workshops, one of the things I like to dwell on a lot in workshops is process. What do you do first, second, third? How do you fix something that isn't working? How do you, all that kind of stuff. That's all process. And my God, it's an ongoing problem that we all work with, particularly if you're doing a plein air piece and you're trying to make it look like you just did it and it happened really easily. And, you know, I've always been intrigued by individuals when they will watch a demonstration and they say, well, you make it look so easy. Well, it's not. If it looks easy, it only looks that way because of a lot of practice. And I was telling a young student, and I tell a lot of students this, is that sometimes I feel like I'm copping out when I tell somebody it's experience, it's practice. You know, I mean, I wish I could tell you something right now to make you a great painter, but in essence, so much of it is just practice. It's just you getting down there, doing it, developing the sensitivity to paint going down, developing sensitivity to color variations, to process. Process is a biggie. I can't stress that enough. Process is something you will work at all of your life. And one of the things that I have always tried to do is I try not to paint the same thing over and over and over, unless I'm working on a show, and then that's a different story. But for the sake of what I'm doing here in front of all of you and what I'm doing when I teach, I literally try and not do just one thing. At the same time, I only can do things that I can do. You know what I'm saying? There are things that are a little bit, I don't want to say beyond me, but they are, and particularly in a time frame. And if you're working within a given time frame, there are certain things that can be done a lot easier than other things. Now, I know in one of the classes that I have been teaching right now, we're doing a Zoom class. We're doing a 3 or 4 week painting, which means we're going back on that painting each week. And you can let it dry. And in doing so, you can get certain effects that you can't get like yesterday, I had a class on location. Basically, they had about maybe 3 hours to do a painting. And I do admit though, yesterday they kind of shocked me. They really did well for a 3-hour painting of trees, and trees really baffle a lot of people. They look easy and they're not easy. And yesterday, my specific class did quite well, and it was really nice to see. Love it. I love to take credit for it. But you know what? If they did it, I didn't do it. So pretty much I could keep doing this, as you probably could tell, for quite a while. I'm not going to, because our time is pretty much up. And with that, this is, by the way, everybody, this is week 98 for me. Who would have thought I would have done it for 98 weeks? In 2 weeks, we hit 100. We hit 100. And so I'm going to try 30 by 40 on that day. A couple figures. See what, not guaranteeing that how good it's going to come off. I'm guaranteeing that I will have enough of the canvas covered. But in terms of it being a real wonderful piece, we'll see what happens. Okay. And that's the beauty of kind of what I'm doing weekly, is hopefully they're going to come out okay and I'm not going to embarrass myself. But in any event, you get the feel of what I was trying to paint. It's pretty loose, works okay. I'm going to thank Scott. I'm going to thank all of you once again. So again, in 2 weeks, next week is 99, and in 2 weeks is 100. And so you guys have a good week. Paint a lot. I know I am. I'm working on a show and some other pieces. So I'm going to keep going. Bye, everybody. Thank you.